My father called a quick family meeting on a Tuesday night. I was still in my work clothes when I walked into the kitchen. My brother sat at the table, arms folded, eyes swollen but dry. My father stood near the counter, hands braced against the marble like he was preparing to deliver instructions, not news. He didn't ask me to sit. "There's a situation," he said evenly. "Your brother made a mistake at work. It's being handled, but the repayment needs to be immediate." I waited. "They're calling it fraud," he continued. "It's exaggerated. Paperwork errors. But the company wants the money back before this escalates." My brother stared at the table. He looked at me directly then. "You need to cover it. Not help. Not loan. Cover it." I asked one question. "How much?" He told me. It was more than my annual salary. "You're stable," he added. "You've always been responsible. This is what family does. We fix things quietly." My brother finally spoke. I didn't mean for it to happen. The tone in the room wasn't angry. It was procedural. The decision had already been made. And in that moment, something became very clear. They weren't asking for help. They were assigning liability. I didn't argue in the kitchen that night. I nodded once, said I needed time to review the details, and went back to my apartment. When you're the person who is always responsible, you learn that decisions are often made about you before you're invited into the room. If you've ever been handed the consequences of someone else's choices simply because you were the steady one, you understand the quiet weight of that expectation. Have you ever been blamed for something you didn't do just because you were the safest person to absorb it? That night, I stopped thinking about the amount. I started thinking about the pattern. My brother has always been described as sensitive. I've always been described as capable. Those labels sound harmless until you examine how they're used. When she forgot to submit college applications on time, my father called in favors and blamed the guidance counselor. When she maxed out her first credit card at 21, my parents paid it off and told relatives it was identity theft. When she left a job abruptly after a conflict with her manager, my father called it a toxic workplace. When I graduated early, I was told, "That's expected." When I bought my first car without assistance, I was told, "That's because you're practical." When I worked late, saved aggressively, and avoided unnecessary debt, it wasn't praised. It was categorized. Responsible. Reliable. Strong. Over time, I understood something. In our family system, responsibility wasn't a compliment. It was infrastructure. If something broke, I absorbed it. Not because I volunteered. Because I could survive it. When my brother struggled, she was comforted. When I struggled, I was told, "You'll figure it out." And I always did. Which meant the pattern reinforced itself. If one daughter could withstand impact, and the other could not, the impact went where it caused the least visible damage. That was the logic. Not malicious. Efficient. By the time we were in our 20s, the roles were fixed. She was protected from consequences. I was expected to manage them. So when my father stood in the kitchen and told me I needed to repay a 6-figure fraud accusation that had nothing to do with me, it didn't feel shocking. It felt consistent. Predictable. I wasn't being punished. I was being utilized. 2 days later, I requested documentation. The situation was straightforward. My brother had been working in accounts receivable for a mid-sized logistics firm. Over several months, she redirected small vendor payments into a secondary account she controlled. The amounts were modest individually. Together, they crossed into criminal territory. The company conducted an internal audit. The discrepancies led to a forensic review. The review led to legal counsel. They gave her an option: repay the funds immediately and resign quietly, or face formal charges. The repayment amount included the diverted funds plus penalties. It was substantial. Her name was on the account. Her login credentials were used. Her IP address matched transaction times. There was no ambiguity. My name did not appear anywhere. I had no shared accounts. No co-signed assets. No overlapping employment. Legally, I had zero exposure. The only connection was relational. Family. That was the lever my father intended to use. From a legal standpoint, the responsibility was singular. From a family standpoint, it was negotiable. People often assume calm means agreement. It doesn't. It means evaluation. I didn't yell in the kitchen because yelling would have shifted the conversation from structure to emotion. Emotion creates openings. Openings invite persuasion. Persuasion becomes pressure. I understood the mechanics. They weren't asking. They were assigning. If I argued, I would have entered the role already prepared for me. The reasonable daughter who could be convinced with the right combination of guilt and urgency. Silence disrupts that script. When I didn't defend myself, they had nothing to counter. When I didn't react, there was nothing to escalate. Calm is often mistaken for compliance. In reality, it's a pause before a decision. The escalation began 3 hours later. My father texted first. This needs to be handled before Friday. Then, the company is willing to keep this internal if payment is received. Then, if this goes public, it affects all of us. By midnight, the messages shifted tone. You work in finance. Reputations matter. I can't protect you if this becomes bigger. The implication was clear. Family unity required financial sacrifice. My brother sent one message. I know I messed up. I just need help getting through this. No details. No repayment plan. Just urgency. The next morning, my father called. You're thinking emotionally, he said. This is business. We solve problems quickly. I am thinking practically, I replied. He exhaled slowly. If you don't step in, this follows her forever. It wasn't loud. It was strategic. Guilt layered over obligation. Obligation layered over fear. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I opened my laptop. Not to transfer funds. To examine exposure. While they escalated pressure, I began separating logistics. I reviewed my lease terms. My employment contract. My savings structure. If I refused, the tension would not disappear. It would intensify. I needed distance to match the decision forming in my head. The first thing I did was pull my credit report. No shared liabilities. No unknown accounts. I downloaded 3 years of bank statements. Every transaction categorized. Every incoming and outgoing wire timestamped. I saved copies to an encrypted drive. Then I reviewed my phone messages. I exported the text thread with my father. Screenshots of phrases like, you need to cover it, and this affects your career too. I wasn't collecting evidence for court. I was building clarity. Clarity is easier to maintain when it's documented. Next, I consulted an attorney. Not dramatically. Not urgently. A scheduled consultation. I presented the facts without embellishment. He confirmed what I already suspected. You have no legal obligation, he said. Do not transfer funds. Do not co-sign anything. If you're concerned about reputational spillover, create distance. Distance. That word repeated in my mind. I set up transaction alerts on every account. I changed my passwords. Enabled two-factor authentication. Removed my parents as emergency contacts at work. Updated beneficiary designations. These weren't dramatic gestures. They were administrative corrections. I also contacted the logistics firm anonymously through counsel to confirm one thing. Was repayment from a third party acceptable? The answer was yes, which meant if I paid, I would permanently attach myself to the paper trail. That would blur responsibility. I would become part of the resolution. That was the silent bank trap. Not something explosive. Something preventative. If anyone attempted to move funds through shared access or implied authorization, alerts would trigger documentation. I wasn't preparing to fight. I was preparing not to be included. On Thursday evening, my father called again. I need confirmation, he said. You won't get it, I replied. Silence. You're refusing? Yes. A long pause. This is your brother. I understand. You're willing to let her face charges? I'm not involved. His voice cooled. So that's it. Yes. There was no speech. No explanation. No defense of my character. Just a boundary. Pressure spiked briefly. You're being selfish. I didn't respond. You'll regret this. I ended the call. The refusal wasn't loud. It was final. The moment I said no, I understood something else. Staying physically close would invite continued attempts at negotiation. If I remained within driving distance, the conversations would continue. If I attended family dinners, the subject would resurface. If I stayed in the same city, proximity would blur resolve. So I opened a travel site. One-way ticket. London. My company had an office there. Internal transfers were possible. I emailed HR. Requested relocation under professional development grounds. Within 24 hours, I had conditional approval. I contacted my landlord. Lease transfer available with a fee. I paid it. I sold my car to an online buyer. Scheduled pickup. I didn't announce any of it. The decision was internal before it became visible. Leaving wasn't about punishment. It was about eliminating proximity to coercion. I was at the airport when my phone began vibrating repeatedly. Missed calls. Voicemails. Messages. The company had moved forward. Legal counsel escalated the matter when repayment wasn't received by deadline. An official complaint was filed. By morning, investigators visited my parents' home. Not because of me, because of documentation. The evidence trail was digital and precise. My brother's access logs, transaction records, internal emails. My father left a voicemail. "They're here. You could have prevented this." I deleted it. Over the next week, extended relatives began calling. Questions framed carefully. What happened? Is it true? I kept my responses brief. I'm not involved, which was accurate. From London, the distance altered the emotional temperature. Without proximity, urgency fades. Without constant contact, guilt has less surface area. My brother retained an attorney. Negotiations shifted from private repayment to formal settlement discussions. Consequences unfolded through structured channels. I did not intervene. I did not fund legal fees. I did not provide commentary. There was no triumph in watching events progress. Only confirmation. Distance protects clarity. Had I paid, the situation would have quieted temporarily, but the role would have solidified permanently. Instead, the system corrected itself. When my boarding group was called, I stood without hesitation. My carry-on was light. Laptop, passport, 2 changes of clothes. I opened my phone one last time before turning it to airplane mode. 47 unread messages. I didn't scroll. I silenced the thread. Archived it. Not out of anger. Out of completion. As the plane lifted, the city shrank beneath cloud cover. There was no dramatic soundtrack in my head. No speech rehearsed for future reconciliation. Just altitude. Movement in one direction. In London, my apartment overlooked a narrow street lined with brick buildings and small cafes. No one there knew my family history. No one introduced me as the responsible daughter. At work, I was evaluated on output, not on resilience. In quiet evenings, I reflected on what had actually shifted. Not my brother's behavior. Not my father's expectations. Those patterns likely continued. What changed was my participation. For years, I believed strength meant absorbing impact quietly. That being capable required being available. That love was measured by sacrifice. But responsibility without consent becomes control. And protection without boundaries becomes permission. Choosing not to pay didn't harm them. It removed me. Choosing to leave didn't punish them. It stabilized me. I don't know how my brother's case ultimately resolved. I know it proceeded through legal channels. I know my father stopped calling after several months. Silence eventually replaced pressure. Sometimes freedom isn't loud. It's administrative. A closed account. A changed address. A refusal spoken once. I didn't burn bridges. I stepped off them. And I have not looked back.